We are now entering week 3 of the New York Islanders general manager search, but there just seems to be a fly in the ointment. We'll have the latest candidates and the latest news coming up next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast.
Your Locked On Islanders, your daily podcast on the New York Islanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to the Tuesday edition of the Locked On Islanders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank everyone who makes Locked On Islanders your first listen every day. Don't forget to subscribe on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. I'm Gil Martin. I've been covering the New York Islanders for almost 2 decades, and I wrote the book Ice Wars on the history of the Islanders' rivalry with the Rangers from 1972 to the modern era. So glad you could join us today to talk a little Islanders hockey. We have got a lot to discuss, most of it centering on the ongoing general manager search. We'll talk about the latest candidates. We'll talk about the fly in the ointment that seems to be complicating everything. And we'll continue our player-by-player review of the Islanders season and a look ahead with Simon Holmstrom. So let's get started with the Islanders general manager search. It seems to be the one thing that is holding everything else back. You can't renew the contracts of different players. You can't plan for the draft. You need to sort of have that general manager in place. And here we are in week 3, and well, it's still up in the air as to what is going to happen. And right now, you have John Collins leading the search. You have basically a situation where Scott Malkin, the majority owner, seems to want to keep Lou Lamoriello around after his contract ends on June 30th. You then have John Ledecky and Oliver Harmon all involved in this GM search. So Ken Holland was originally the Islanders' top choice to be both president and or general manager. But he seems a lot more interested in the LA Kings GM job, which is also vacant. And it makes sense. Holland, has been in Edmonton. The West Coast would certainly be closer to family. And there is a feeling around the NHL that the Kings need a lot less work to return to contention than the Islanders. So you take over the Kings job, you could probably turn that team around quicker. I mean, look, they've made the playoffs the last 4 years. They've just lost to the same team, the Edmonton Oilers, in each of those 4 years. So he is right now the favorite for the Kings job. But as far as the Islanders job is concerned, he doesn't seem all that interested. Everydayers, you will also recall, we mentioned that the Islanders were interested in talking to Montreal Canadiens VP of Hockey Operations, Jeff Gorton, but Gorton and the Habs not willing to make that happen. So Gorton going to stay in Montreal. The Islanders do not have permission to speak to him. So the 3 major candidates as of right now that the Islanders are expected to speak with this week are former Canadiens GM and current LA Kings advisor Mark Bergevin, former Blue Jackets general manager Jarmo Kakalainen, Tampa Bay assistant GM Matthew Darsh, and hopefully those people will be interviewing formally with the Islanders at some point this week. Now, they've already held conversations, according to Arthur Staple and a few other sources, with these people, but formal interviews have yet to take place as of the beginning of this week. Brendan Shanahan, Toronto Maple Leafs president, still does not have an extension in place with the Leafs, but the Islanders are reportedly not interested in bringing Shanahan in for an interview right now. And as a result, well, we're still kind of up in the air as to what happens with that. You also have a situation where there are other candidates who are still out there who may ultimately interview with the New York Islanders, but aren't scheduled to do that yet. And we'll see. It remains a situation that is very much up in the air for the New York Islanders. And, time continues to slip away. And the longer it goes, it's not that I feel that the Islanders need to hurry up and hire somebody because, they'll lose out on a particular person. No, it's that the way this is being done just seems to be not coordinated well. And it seems like Collins has one approach. It seems that Malkin has a different approach. And it just overall makes the whole thing seem to drag on. You add the fact that you've got candidates who are, still have their teams in the mix, in the playoff mix. So you are delayed to an extent with those candidates to interview them. And it just makes for what is essentially a messy situation. And all of these leaks that are coming out, first of all, you always want to know when there's information being leaked. If it's possible, who's leaking the information, and then what is their agenda? Those are the questions that you inevitably need to ask yourself when information is leaked out, whether it's on through different reporters. Who do those reporters have connections to, relationships with? What is their general connection to the entire situation? These are the questions that, as a member of the media or as a fan, you want to ask to try to get to the bottom of the story behind the story. But for the New York Islanders, as of right now, everything seems to be on hold. And when I say everything seems to be on hold, it is without a doubt, there's a lot of stuff that is on hold. And I like some of these candidates. I like Darsh. I like Kekalainen. I think he did some good things with the Blue Jackets during his time there. Bergevin is interesting, but I'm not sure. And then the other candidate that I mentioned in passing without naming him is Steve Greeley, who is within the Dallas Stars organization, but the Stars are still in the playoffs. Do you wait to interview Greeley? Is he that high of a candidate? And the other thing is this, and it's kind of upsetting from an Islanders fan perspective. How many people have already turned down the Islanders? Holland was allegedly, the number one candidate that the Islanders had in the entire, search process. Well, Holland apparently not interested in the Islanders' job. And, can you get, you have Holland turning you down. Gorton isn't going anywhere. You keep ending up going down the list. And you know what? I think it would benefit the Islanders in a lot of ways to cut down on these leaks. because the more information like this gets out, the more egg there seems to be on the face of the New York Islanders organization. You would think that the decision to relieve Lou Lamoriello of his duties was made weeks ago, that the Islanders ownership would put a plan in place. They would have specific things they wanted to talk to, things they were looking for in a general manager. The ducks should be lined up and in a row, and it just doesn't seem to be falling out that way, where the Islanders are attempting to speak to certain people who don't seem to want to speak to them, and it just looks more and more like this is not a desirable place for a general manager to go. And there are reasons for it to be desirable. You've got a franchise goalie in Ilya Sorokin, who is in his prime right now. You've got Bo Horvat. You've got Matthew Barzal. You've got Simon Holmstrom, who is a young up-and-coming player. You've got Richie, who is coming up next year and is considered a top prospect. Cole Yzerman, probably a couple of years away, but also considered a top prospect. And you've got the number one pick in this year's draft. So, whether you go for Schaefer or you go for Misa or you go for Higgins or you trade the pick, you should be adding one or more significant assets to your prospect pool. And add to that, you've got 2 first-round picks in 2026, which, again, either you can use those 2 picks, use one and trade one for a player or a prospect, or to move up and get a higher pick. There are a lot of things you can do to make this team better. Now, you still have a lot of work to do to clear out some of the dead wood on this roster, some of the bad contracts, some of the older players. It's not an insult to those players. It's thank you for your service. We appreciate everything you've done for the team, but it's time. And yes, the no trade clauses and modified no trade clauses and everydayers, we spoke about this yesterday. Those are things that make it a little more complicated, but not impossible. So who's up for the challenge? Who wants to be a GM in the New York area with all of these assets and all of these opportunities? And yes, some of these challenges. But as I said at the top of the show, there's a fly in the ointment, and its name is Lou Lamoriello. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about Simon Holmstrom. And for our Islanders birthday of the day, an original Islanders winger who was only with the team for 56 games during their inaugural season. He passed away a couple of years ago. Let's see if you can guess who that is. All that still to come on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by Wonderful Pistachios. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days, whether I'm snacking at my desk, on a road trip, or just need a quick protein boost. They're always my go-to. And if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, the in-shell options are a classic favorite. So get snacking and get cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. That's wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. As I mentioned, there is a fly in the ointment with this GM search. And it all comes back to Lou Lamoriello. He is, his shadow seems to be casting a pall over this GM search. Why? Again, according to various published reports, it's majority owner Scott Malkin, who apparently wants Lou Lamoriello to remain in the organization beyond the expiration of his contract on June 30th. Not as the GM, not as the president of hockey operations, but in some kind of advisory capacity. Here's the problem, okay? You would be taking over this new job if you're the new GM of the New York Islanders, knowing that your predecessor is A, still in the building, and B, has the ear and has influence over the majority owner in Scott Malkin. It is better for the Islanders organization and for fans who understand the issues that Lou Lamoriello had, the mistakes that he made, and the reasons that he had to be let go, even if it was a year later than we wanted it to be, maybe more. It just isn't good to have Lou hanging over the new GM. And again, I'm not saying Lou can't be helpful. I'm not saying you call him up and you have a question. Hey, I'm thinking about doing this. Lou, what do you think? Does he have to be on the official payroll to do that? Probably not. Hockey is a pretty insular, closed circle. Everybody really more or less knows everybody else. But it just goes even beyond that. You're the new GM. You want to clear out some of these contracts that Lou signed that are problematic, that either the players are fading age-wise or never should have gotten, as much money and as much term as they got, or guys who have modified no trade clauses and no trade clauses. It's more difficult to move those guys out when the guy who gave them the contract is still in the organization. Plus, almost certain that a new GM has to revamp the mess that is the Bridgeport Islanders, a team that only won 4 home games out of 36 this year and set an AHL record for futility. Who's the general manager right now of the Bridgeport Islanders? Chris Lamoriello, Lou's son. If Lou is still in the organization, will the new general manager have the authority if he wants to fire Chris Lamoriello? Will he have the authority if he wants to move on from assistant coaches like John McClain, who ran the league's next to worst power play last year, or Tommy Albaline, who ran the league's next to worst penalty kill in his only year? Those guys are Lou Lamoriello hires. They weren't even Patrick Waugh hires. If Lou is still in the organization, can you fire Chris? Can you move on from these assistant coaches? Can you move on from Patrick Waugh, who Lou just signed to, apparently, according to published reports, a 3-year contract extension? You don't want the person who made the decisions that got you into this mess hanging around the organization in anything but a very informal capacity, if that. The best thing, it may not be the easiest thing. It may hurt for a couple of seconds, but when you've got that Band-Aid on your arm and you got hair there, it's going to hurt when you rip it off, but the best thing you could do is rip it off. It's time to turn the page from Lou Lamoriello. If the new GM comes in, will he be able to say, hey, long hair, facial hair, high numbers on the jerseys, is that okay? How much influence, if any, will Lou Lamoriello have if he sticks around? Will he be a shadow hanging over the Islanders organization, or will he just be somebody in the background? Again, I have nothing against Lou Lamoriello personally. I respect everything he accomplished in his Hall of Fame career as a general manager with the Devils, his time with the Maple Leafs. And yes, he helped initially this Islanders team. He hired Barry Trotz. They went to back-to-back conference finals for the first time since the dynasty years. They won a playoff series, more than one playoff series in a season for the first time since 1993. These are all accomplishments that you give Lou credit for. But if you're bringing in somebody new, they have to have free reign and authority to do things the way they want to do them. And keeping the old boss around doesn't seem to me to be a way to entice a new person coming in as the general manager and or president of hockey operations. Oh, yeah, you're welcome. You've got the job, but your predecessor is going to be looking over your shoulder in some way, shape, or form. And oh, by the way, the owner kind of likes him and trusts him, and he has influence over the owner, the majority owner. That is not a recipe for turning the page, ripping the Band-Aid off, and moving forward. Yeah, it's painful sometimes, but sometimes you got to go through pain or surgery or just ripping that Band-Aid off in order to get well. And the Islanders need to make as clean a break from Lou as possible. And if he stays in the organization in some capacity, he has got to be only at the beck and call of whoever the new GM is going to be. And you think about, Ken Holland, he had ties to Lou. And again, you want the new guy to be different from the old guy, to have a different approach. I've used this analogy before on the show, but I think it holds up. When you fire a player's coach, you bring in a disciplinarian, usually as your replacement. When you fire a disciplinarian, you usually hire a player's coach. You're always correcting the last mistake that you made, or, you're compensating for the shortcomings of the last person. Well, Lou didn't build young players. He traded away a lot of draft picks. He was constantly chasing 8th place in the conference to sneak into the playoffs. The new general manager has to have a really different approach to make this team get better. And having Lou Lamoriello involved complicates the search, complicates certain people who wouldn't want that to be the case if they're going to take the job. And it just isn't good for fans, most of whom understand that it was past time to move on from Lou, and now the Islanders finally did it. We'll see what happens, but it is definitely something that bears watching as this search continues to drag on. We've got more to discuss on today's show. Simon Holmstrom improved, but did he grade out well? We're going to talk about how he did, what his future ceiling is with the team. Plus, we'll have our Islanders birthday of the day and more next on today's Locked On Islanders podcast. So Simon Holmstrom is one of the up-and-coming young players on the Islanders, one of the few players who Lou Lamoriello actually held on to as a first-round pick, and one of only 2 players that Lou Lamoriello drafted in the first round who have made any kind of mark on the Islanders organization with the big club. Let's put it that way. A career high 20 goals in 75 games, 45 points in 75 games. That is 20 points more than he had in the same number of games a year ago. So it's 5 more goals, 15 more assists. Holmstrom was a +5 in the plus minus, and he only had 8 penalty minutes all year. 2 of his goals came on the power play. 1 was shorthanded. He also had 3 shorthanded assists, and 4 power play assists. He continues to shoot well, a 20.8% shooting percentage for the second year in a row. His shots on goal up to 96 in 75 games after 72 the previous year. His shot attempts are up even more, 208 in 75 games, up from 152 the year before. And his ice time is up by 3 minutes and a little more than 3.5 minutes. He's almost playing 17 minutes a game. He blocked 55 shots. That's up by 9 from the previous year. And even his hits, while only 27 hits in 75 games, physicality, really not a big part of Simon Holmstrom's game. But he only had 19 hits the year before, so he's improving. 6'2", 215. To me, at this point, Holmstrom has the ability to be better. And right now, he reached the 20-goal plateau for the first time in his career. I think this year, with the right line mates, he can start the season possibly on the second line, depending on who else the Islanders keep, bring in, whatever, who's healthy. There's a lot of factors. You got to figure he's a middle six guy at this point. Second line or third line. If he's second line, fine. He has to prove he belongs there over the long haul. He seemed to do well in that role in the last, after the trade deadline especially. But at the same time, third line, I think, is where he is for the most part, but I think he has the potential to be a second line guy, and maybe in a year or two, could 30 goals be possible? Maybe. And if he does get to, 28, 30 goals a year, could he be a first line guy? Maybe. I'm not sold on it, but I think the potential is there, and so much of it has to do with confidence. That shooting percentage we talked about is elite. Imagine if he could keep that shooting percentage roughly the same. Maybe it goes down a little the more shots he takes, from 20.8 rather to, let's say, 18.5. Let's say it goes down a little, but his shots on goal go up by a third. There's your 28, 30 goals right there. And it's a lot about confidence. If he can be a little more confident, I think he can take his game to yet another level. Remember this about Simon Holmstrom. Simon Holmstrom is still, at this point in time, and he's been on the Islanders now for 3 full seasons, Simon Holmstrom will not turn 24 until later this month. His birthday is coming up in a week and a half. He's 23 going on 24 this season. There is still a lot of good hockey ahead of Simon Holmstrom, and I am glad he will be back next year with the Islanders. He's an RFA. Let's hope the new GM signs him. Time now for, grade for me, A- for Simon Holmstrom. Time now for our Islanders birthday of the day. And, well, we are a day early on what would have been the 87th birthday of former Islanders winger Don Blackburn. The Kirkland Lake, Ontario native made his NHL debut with the Boston Bruins in 1962-63, was an original member of the Flyers, played briefly for the Rangers, and then joined the Islanders in their expansion season of 1972-73, played 56 games for the Isles, 7 goals, 17 points, 20 penalty minutes, and was a -33. Then played briefly for the Minnesota North Stars, and then finished his career with the New England Whalers of the WHA. Played in 185 career NHL games, 23 goals, 67 points, 87 penalty minutes, add 3 goals in 12 playoff games. Obviously, none of those with the Islanders. His best game with the Isles, that's easy. January 18th, 1973, Islanders and the Big Bad Bruins at the Boston Garden. Billy Smith, the goalie for the Islanders, and Eddie Johnston getting the start for the Bruins. Our Islanders' birthday of the day, Don Blackburn, opens the scoring a little more than 2 minutes into the game. Craig Cameron and Tom Miller get the assists. Islanders up 1-0. Then Billy Harris, Lorne Henning, Ed Westfall, they score to make it 4-0 Islanders. And Don Blackburn, our Islanders' birthday of the day, scores his second goal of the game from Bob Cook to make it 5-0 Islanders. Now remember, at this point, the Bruins are the defending Stanley Cup champions. They've got Bobby Orr, Phil Esposito, Johnny Busick, Wayne Cashman. They are full of Hall of Famers and All-Stars. And they begin to come back in this game. They make it a game after being down 5-0, but in the third period, Don Blackburn, our Islanders' birthday of the day, sets up Tom Miller to make the score 8-6 Islanders. The Islanders hold on for a 9-7 win. Billy Smith, 31 saves in the win, but for Don Blackburn, our Islanders' birthday of the day, 2 goals, 1 assist. He scored on both of his shots on goal in this game as the Islanders crushed beat the defending Stanley Cup champion Boston Bruins 9-7 after taking that 5-0 lead. This was only the 5th win in New York Islanders history. Thank you for making Locked On Islanders your first listen today. For your second listen, check out the all-new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night until the Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale. You can find NHL Game Night on Locked On NHL, on YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. If you have a question, a comment, maybe a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, send us an email to lockedonislanders@gmail.com. And if you leave your first name and where you're from, we're happy to mention you on the show when we discuss whatever's on your mind. And we will be doing a mailbag episode shortly, so get those questions in. You can follow the show on X at Locked On Isles. You can follow me, Gil Martin, on X at Ice Wars, NYR vs NYI. We'll keep you up to date on all things Islanders throughout this critical off season. And it's great to talk Islanders hockey with you, game time or anytime. Everydayers, we're back tomorrow. We continue our player-by-player look at the Islanders with Matt Martin. So make sure you join us for that. And hopefully we'll have some new news on the GM search, plus how some Islanders prospects are doing in the junior playoffs, the OHL playoffs, and in the World Championships, where you've got Dobson and Horvat playing. So we'll keep you up to date on all of that. Until then, have a great day, everybody. Stay safe. And of course, let's go Islanders.